What happened to Lori Paige? The question echoed across Tallahassee for nearly 2 years. We got an answer in April when police charged her father, Andrew Wiley, with killing her and dumping her body. Then the question became why. Tonight we have an answer that's very tough to take. The state attorney says Wiley sexually assaulted 12-year-old Lori. Our Matt Hoffman was the first to speak with Jack Campbell today after Wiley's death in jail last week. Matt?
Yeah, you said it, Jacob. The state attorney told us that Andrew Wiley's actions mean the motive for killing Lori Paige was likely sexual assault. The state attorney also revealed for the first time that Andrew Wiley was being treated for an STD at the time of Lori Paige. The criminal case against Andrew Wiley is now over after he died in jail.
It started like any other quiet Florida afternoon until a single phone call turned peace into horror. A man's calm voice on the 911 line claimed his girlfriend had collapsed, wasn't breathing. But behind that eerie composure hid something darker, something the paramedics would never forget. At 5:36 p.m. on June 19th, 2025, police and medics rushed to a small Palm Bay apartment in Brevard County. Inside, they found 28-year-old Nicole "Nikki" Johnson lying motionless on the bedroom floor. Her boyfriend, 32-year-old Andrew Wiley, stood nearby, emotionless, insisting she'd overdosed. But within moments, the story began to unravel. The bruises around her neck, the bleach in the bathroom, the trembling silence in Andrew's eyes. What was supposed to be a medical call quickly became a murder scene, one that would expose lies, obsession, and the final moments of a young woman who tried to escape. This wasn't an overdose. It was a nightmare, and the start of one of Brevard County's most haunting homicide investigations.
Jacob, the state attorney told us that Andrew Wiley's actions mean the motive for killing Lori Paige was likely sexual assault. The state attorney also revealed for the first time that Andrew Wiley was being treated for an STD at the time of Lori Paige. The criminal case against Andrew Wiley is now over after he died in jail on June 19th. State Attorney Jack Campbell said the investigation is also over unless new information comes to light. Right now, the evidence suggests Wiley acted alone.
Unfortunately, deal every year with sexual abuse, where people do impregnate children and even their own children. If he had gotten her pregnant, if he had given her a venereal disease, those would be hard things to explain.
Andrew Wiley's brother told us he planned to defend himself at trial. The defense was going to say that Lori Paige was seen after police said she died. Campbell, though, said the evidence against Andrew Wiley is strong.
Were there signs that she was suffering? Yes. Is there somebody who I feel is responsible for not catching it? No one else other than Andrew Wiley was responsible for what happened to Lori Paige.
Prosecutors considered charging him from the outset, even without recovering Paige's body. But a so-called no-body murder case would have been difficult.
What's the possibility that he could have, instead of killing her, he could have injected her and put her into a human trafficking area?
Prosecutors said this was likely never going to be a death penalty case because they just can't say precisely what happened to Lori Paige in the final hours of her life.
The scene inside that small Palm Bay apartment was nothing short of chaos. Nicole Johnson's body bore the unmistakable signs of violence. Deep bruises circling her neck, faint marks along her jawline, the silent testimony of a struggle that had turned deadly. The apartment itself looked like a war zone. Blood-stained bedding, overturned furniture, prescription bottles scattered across the floor. The air was thick with the acrid stench of bleach. A desperate attempt to erase what had been done. Someone had tried to clean, but no amount of scrubbing could wash away the truth. Andrew Wiley stood motionless in the corner, his face expressionless, his gaze hollow. When detectives questioned him, his story shifted like sand in the tide. First, he claimed Nikki had taken sleeping pills. Then, he said she'd fallen during an argument. But the physical evidence told another story, one written in bruises and silence. Crime scene technicians moved swiftly, collecting every trace. Fingerprints, blood samples, digital devices, and footage from nearby cameras. Within hours, detectives reached a grim conclusion. This was no accident. Nicole Johnson had been murdered. Neighbors described the couple's relationship as volatile. Nights filled with shouting, doors slamming, and the muffled sound of crying. Yet online, their social media painted a perfect lie. Smiles on beaches, filtered sunsets, captions about love. Beneath that facade, investigators uncovered a cycle of control, manipulation, and fear that had been spiraling toward tragedy. Just days before her death, Nicole confided in a close friend. She said she was finally ready to leave Andrew. For good. That message, retrieved from her phone, would later become one of the most damning pieces of evidence in the entire case. When the medical examiner's report finally arrived, it confirmed what detectives already suspected. Cause of death, manual strangulation. There were no drugs, no alcohol, no overdose, only the cruel imprint of human hands. The timeline placed her final breath just hours before Andrew's 911 call, turning his calm voice on the phone into sound of chilling deceit.
Where people do impregnate children and even their own children. If he had gotten her pregnant, if he had given her a venereal disease, those would be hard things to explain.
Andrew Wiley's brother told us he planned to defend himself at trial. The defense was going to say that Lori Paige was seen after police said she died. Campbell, though, said the evidence against Andrew Wiley is strong.
Were there signs that she was suffering? Yes. Is there somebody who I feel is responsible for not catching it? No one else other than Andrew Wiley was responsible for what happened to Lori Paige.
Prosecutors considered charging him from the outset, even without recovering Paige's body. But a so-called no-body murder case would have been difficult.
What's the possibility that he could have, instead of killing her, he could have injected her and put her into a human trafficking area?
Prosecutors said this was likely never going to be a death penalty case because they just can't say precisely what happened to Lori Paige in the final hours of her life.
You know, the biggest evidence in the case was his phone leading us to this plantation where her body was eventually found, which really doesn't make any sense that he would be there.
Detectives confronted him with the autopsy findings. His composure began to crack. "I didn't mean to," he whispered during questioning. "We were just fighting." She wouldn't stop yelling. It wasn't a confession, but it was enough for the police to move forward. On June 21st, 2025, Andrew Way was officially charged with second-degree murder. Forensic analysts began digging through Andrew's phone and laptop. What they uncovered painted a dark psychological portrait. Search histories revealed queries like, how long does it take someone to stop breathing? And can you tell if someone's dead without a pulse? There were also messages sent to friends hours after Nicole's death, casual, almost attached, as if nothing had happened. Detectives also recovered deleted text messages between Andrew and Nicole. In one exchange, she begged him to stop following her. In another, she threatened to go to police. Each message was a breadcrumb, leading investigators deeper into the truth of what had unfolded behind closed doors. Inside the stark walls of the Brevard County Sheriff's interrogation room, Andrew's demeanor shifted from calm to defensive. "You don't understand," he said, leaning forward across the metal table. She was screaming. "Hit me. I just tried to make her stop." Detectives pressed him on the inconsistencies. The bleach, the bruises, the timeline. He offered half answers, excuses, silence. At one point, he broke down, burying his face in his hands. "I loved her," he muttered. But love, detectives knew, doesn't leave bruises like that. Hours later, he signed a statement. Not quite a confession, but an admission that he had placed his hands around her neck for just a few seconds. Those seconds, the autopsy confirmed, were enough to end her life. When news of Nicole's death reached her family, devastation turned to disbelief. Her mother described her as bright, loving, and full of dreams. She was supposed to start nursing school, she told reporters, tears streaming down her face. She just wanted a better life. Friends began posting tributes online, photos, videos, and heartfelt messages under the hashtag #JusticeForNikki. Candlelight vigils followed across Brevard County, with hundreds attending to honor the young woman whose life had been brutally cut short. Detectives continued to piece together the final 24 hours of Nicole's life. Surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store showed her at 3:17 p.m. buying snacks and a bottle of water, calm, unaware of what awaited her. Neighbors reported hearing shouting around 5 p.m., followed by a loud thud. By 5:36 p.m., Andrew had dialed 911. The timeline was airtight. Every second mattered. Investigators now had physical evidence, digital proof, and witness statements. The puzzle was complete, but the motive still lingered in the shadows. Psychological evaluation reports later described Andrew as narcissistic with obsessive tendencies. He displayed controlling behavior and emotional detachment. He wasn't insane, but he was dangerous. Someone who couldn't tolerate losing control. Prosecutors argued that when Nicole tried to leave, his ego snapped. What followed was an impulsive act of rage. It was domination, the final assertion of power over someone who refused to be controlled. The trial began in late August 2025, drawing national attention. Prosecutors presented the chilling evidence: the bruises, the bleach, the deleted messages, and the disturbing Google searches. The defense argued that Andrew acted in self-defense, claiming Nicole attacked him first. But jurors weren't convinced and played the 911 recording in court. Andrew's voice was eerily calm as he told the dispatcher, "She's not breathing. I think she took something." The lack of panic, the calculated tone, it all pointed to one conclusion. He knew she was already gone. Witnesses described a controlling relationship fueled by jealousy. Friends testified that Nicole had confided in them about wanting to escape. Every testimony built a clearer picture. This wasn't an accident. It was an inevitable tragedy. After a week of testimony and 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. As the judge read the sentence, life in prison without parole, Andrew sat motionless. No reaction, no apology, just the same cold attachment that had defined him since that first 911 call. Nicole's family embraced, tears mixing with relief. Justice had been served, but it could never bring her back. In the months that followed, Nicole's story became a rallying cry for victims of domestic abuse. Local organizations launched campaigns under her name, promoting awareness and early intervention. Lawmakers began discussing reforms to protect victims attempting to leave abusive partners. Detectives involved in the case later admitted it was one of the hardest investigations of their careers. Not just because of its brutality, but because of how easily it could have been prevented. She was trying to get out. One officer said, "She almost made it." Even after conviction, questions lingered. Why had Andrew cleaned the scene before calling 911? Why did he seem so calm? Was there premeditation? Investigators believed there was more to the story, that the murder wasn't a sudden outburst but a calculated act. But in the end, all that mattered was that Nicole's voice, silence in life, had finally been heard in death. Detective Laura Bennett, who led the case, later reflected in an interview, "Every homicide tells a story, and this one told us how fear hides behind love." Nicole was trapped in something she thought was normal until it wasn't. Her partner, Detective Mark Rivera, added, "People think monsters look a certain way, but sometimes they look like the person who says they love you." Those words echoed long after the trial ended, reminders of the thin line between affection and control. Today, Nicole Johnson's family continues to honor her memory through the Nikki Foundation for Domestic Safety, offering counseling and safe housing for women at risk. Her mother keeps her daughter's phone locked away. Messages, photos, dreams frozen in time. "It's all I have left," she says softly, "but at least the world knows what he did." As for Andrew Way, he remains behind bars, serving a sentence in a Florida State Correctional Facility. No visitors, no statements, no appeals filed. Silence. The same silence that began the story. At the end of it all, this case wasn't just about a crime. It was about control, silence, and the fragile boundaries between love and fear. Nicole's story reminds us that abuse doesn't always start with violence. It begins with isolation, manipulation, and the quiet erosion of freedom. So tonight, if you're watching this and someone you know is struggling in silence, reach out before it's too late. For the mothers who forgive the unforgivable, for the families who carry the scars of silence, and for the children who deserve more, your story matters, and we will not stop telling it.